March Madness is officially here. We've had Selection Sunday, and now we're breaking down Clemson's matchup with McNeese State, as well as the potential 4-5 game against Purdue. To do that, it's sort of fortunate we got Drew Schneider joining. He is a writer for Shaken the Southland, Clemson site, and Hammer and Rails, a Purdue site. So really couldn't be a more perfect guest. Drew, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem. This was the sort of draw of doom for me, as we've been trying to avoid this matchup since I think it happened to maybe 10 years ago when Purdue played Clemson in Little John. But I don't like these games. But I do have a lot to say about them.
Yeah, both of your audiences will be angry at you for something, I'm sure. I know you weren't happy about it, but as soon as I saw it, I said, yes, Drew's going to be a perfect guest. This is going to be awesome. So let's jump right in. We'll talk Purdue later, but obviously we got to start with McNeese. As you know, the Clemson-Purdue matchup, probably better than 50-50 is going to happen, but certainly far from certainty. So when I saw McNeese, no disrespect to them whatsoever. They earned their way in by winning the Southland Conference, but I gave a little cheer because there are some dangerous 12 seeds, in particular UC San Diego, who's number 36 in KenPom, and Colorado State is number 42. And then you see a pretty notable drop-off there. So avoiding those two kind of more dangerous ones was, I think, a good draw as far as good draws go in the NCAA tournament. That was my initial reaction. I gave a big cheer. What did you think, Drew?
Yeah, no, McNeese is very much a system team. They rely on what they do to win games, as opposed to some teams that have maybe are able to rely more on individual talent and sort of can play out of the system. McNeese does what they do, and they sort of win or lose by that, basically, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so let's look at it. I thought it was interesting. I'm going through. So the McNeese Cowboys out of Louisiana, 27-6, 19-1 in conference. They won 22 of 23 once they got into their much weaker conference play. But when you look at their net, 58. I mean, certainly not bad, but it's nothing crazy. And the KenPom's right on top of it as well. And they only give them a 28% chance to beat Clemson. And so I'm thinking, what gives you an upset? What's kind of the recipe for an upset? And to me, I think for the prototypical upset to me was Oakland beating 3-seeded Kentucky last year when they had the one guy just go, I think it was 10 for 10 from three. And they were you're just making a million threes. And so what stands out to me is they don't make a lot of threes. So I look at, have they played any good teams? And yes, they have, and they've gone 1-4 against them. Now they were pretty competitive, very competitive with Mississippi State, but lost to Liberty on neutral court, a fellow 12 seed, lost to Alabama on the road. I mean, that's a really tough one. Lost to Mississippi State, lost to Santa Clara. Their lone quad 2 win is a home game against North Texas. Not the scariest, I don't think. Am I missing something crazy here?
No, I mean, that is sort of typical mid-major. They, kudos for them. They did play well against their, A-level teams or quad 1 teams. Losing by 8 on the road to Bama is certainly not anything bad. Even Liberty only dropping that game 4 points on neutral court. So, they even in the games where they were clearly out-talented, they've hung around. And then, when they get out of conference play where they have, the really good system, their system that they run that creates a bunch of turnovers, and they're more talented than the rest of their conference, they just blew everybody out. So, it's a dangerous team. They're tough to beat. They're tough to put away, and that's always concerning in the NCAA tournament, right? You get these teams like McNeese that are tough to put away. They hang around. The crowd gets behind them, and then suddenly, it tightens up at the end, and they've got all the momentum. So definitely a dangerous opponent for Clemson, and they kind of play a little bit like Clemson. So I could definitely see this being a game with it's going to be a possession for possession battle. So it'll be a rock fight, I think, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if they could stick with Alabama, then they could certainly stick with Clemson. And something that you mentioned was how they force turnovers. They are 18th in turnover percentage forced. 11th in steal percentage, 66th overall on defensive efficiency. So they're okay. They're okay in general on defense, but specifically they're going to turn you over, and so that'll be interesting to see. What do Clemson's guards do? Do they take care of the ball? And of course, I think a big concern in general, but especially when you see that, is Dylan Hunter's out. He's Clemson's all-time leader, all-time in assist turnover ratio, which is a wild stat. But he just really takes care of the ball. So can they speed up? I don't know if speed up is the word, but can they cause Clemson to make some careless turnovers? Clemson hasn't been quite as sharp lately as they were kind of in the middle of ACC play. I think that is absolutely critical for them pulling an upset.
Yeah, no, definitely. If the upset happens, it'll be because McNeese just turns over Clemson and frustrates the offense that way. One place I think Clemson can really sort of hurt McNeese is on the boards, though. They're not a good offensive rebounding team, even in a bad conference, or in their conference, but they're like 260th, and they're really small. I think their starting center is like 6'9", 215, and that really just like Shefflin and Lagan should eat. Like they should just clean up every miss, and that's really got to be almost Clemson's goal, right? Is to just get a shot, get something headed towards the basket as opposed to a turnover. At this game, a bad shot isn't awful as long as it draws rim, because Clemson should just be able to dominate the boards.
Yeah, I agree that Clemson will have a big advantage from a height standpoint. Joe Charles is their center at 6'9". He's really efficient, and he gets 7.1 rebounds per game. Lockett and Shefflin should really dominate the post. They need to stay out of foul trouble. I think getting them in foul trouble gives McNeese a shot because they're not so undersized, if that's the case. But yeah, Clemson should attack them down low and dominate there. This McNeese team reminds me of sort of a diet UNC, in that they're not very big and they don't shoot threes all that well. So they got a bunch of guards who can't shoot, and yet they're still somehow pretty good. They're only 77th in three-point percentage, 35.6%, not terrible, but the percentage or the proportion of their points that come from three is very, very low, 226th. And that's where they're so different from a team like Oakland last year, where they were fine percentage-wise, pretty similar actually, shooting the three, but they took a ton of them. So if they get hot, they're really dangerous. I don't think McNeese, that's just not how they play. So there's not really a scenario of a realistic one or high probability one where they're going to shoot 43s and they just start dropping and there's nothing you could do. So I think that helps Clemson, makes them a little bit less of kind of a darling upset team. The crazy thing, and maybe I've missed some sort of an injury or something, but I checked a couple times over here. So their leading scorer, Javon Garcia, 6'3" guard, not a great three-point shooter. He doesn't, that's not his thing. So that's part of the reason they don't shoot a ton of threes. He's averaging 12.9 points per game. Their next leading scorer comes off the bench, Sincere Parker, another guard, 6'3", another kind of shooting guard, 12.1 points per game. He's 11th in shot percentage, which is to say when he's on the court, and he averages about 19 minutes because he's a bench guy, but when he's on the court, he takes such a large proportion of the team's shots. Only 10 guys in the entire nation take a larger proportion of the team's shots. So it's going to be really interesting to see a guy come off the bench and just be a volume guy. He shot 109 three-point attempts, shooting a less than 30%, which is wild that a coach would allow him to keep going at that rate. It's just crazy. So I'm really interested to see what's going on there. That is a weird stat.
Hey, kudos for that guy. That's confidence, man. I don't know if I can handle that, even just like in an open gym, just going out there and just shooting. What? Oh man,
29.
God, yeah, 29%. Like I think if I was hitting 3 out of every 10 attempts, I might stop shooting.
Yeah, so, he's 32 for 109, 29.4% from three.
Sort of going through, man. They've really sort of ground through some lineups this year too. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different guys that have started games for him this year.
Wow. So one other guy I didn't mention is DJ Richards. He's another guard. It's 6'4", another winger. 44.6% three-point shooter. That's 26th nationally, and he's attempted 175. So he's kind of like fixing their three-point percentage all on his own. And then they have a bunch of guys who probably should shoot fewer threes, and then you got him. So he's the one guy who can get hot and have a weird Oakland, Kentucky kind of game. That's the one thing that's kind of scary. But, put Jaden Zachary on him, and you could kind of shut him down. But I don't know if you kind of burn your best defender on him.
Yeah, so one thing that it does give me some confidence in Clemson. I feel like as a veteran team, this sort of weird playing style is not going to sort of shake them maybe as much as a younger team. I mean, everybody, we've seen everything. They're not going to four guards isn't going to blow minds out there. And so that is sort of like Zachary's going to stay with that assignment. He's not going to be a guy that just gets lost because he gets bored and they're doing the weird stuff. And then all of a sudden, they've got a guy going off for like 40. I feel like Clemson's going to be assignment sound, do their jobs. And a lot of times in these games, that's when you get in trouble, when you get away from that. I think this Clemson team, if nothing else, is pretty decent at executing the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson has not had a whole lot of duds this year. I mean, you had the South Carolina game on the road in a rivalry game early in the year. That was bad. And you had a triple overtime loss where you didn't box out and you didn't get offensive rebounds against Georgia Tech. Besides that, they've generally played at least decent. They've had a high floor. So I feel pretty good about that from that perspective. Any other thoughts on sort of the outcome of this game, where your head's at going into it?
I'm pretty comfortable with Clemson. It's always if they hit their shots. There's going to be open shots. McNeese is going to scramble. They're going to look for turnovers. It's really just up to Clemson when those opportunities are there to hit the open shots and then just to not turn it over, get the ball going towards the basket, hit the boards hard, and sort of physically dominate this game. I do feel like that's why I like Clemson. I think this is a game they can physically dominate, and right. That's their playing style. So it plays into what Clemson does well on offense, at least.
Yeah, the one thing they have to do is not get sped up, not rush. They're both kind of lower tempo. So that just makes that all the easier, right? Don't speed up unnecessarily and dominate in the post. The one thing we haven't talked about is Will Wade, former Clemson, I believe Clemson assistant at one point, but a Clemson grad, notably. LSU coach, got kind of busted in that. I say kind of. He did get busted in the FBI scandal. Now he's at McNeese, a couple hours away, still in Louisiana. Interesting, we finally play Will Wade, a guy who a lot of fans at one point really wanted Brad out, Will Wade in. Bullet dodge there.
Right, and one of the black sheep. It's been a good season for the black sheeps of the coaching society, with Bruce Pearl at Auburn and Will Wade winning big at McNeese. And I guess it's been a tough year for Bill Self, but I guess he was never officially on that list.
Yeah, they're in the tournament too.
Right. So, Will Wade is a lightning rod of controversy in college basketball, and that he will be having a lot to say if McNeese wins this game. So I'd like for him not to have those things to say.
Right. So anyway, I guess to close on McNeese before we shift over to Purdue, I just think it's not a knock on them to say the matchup. Sort of you could see a team that isn't as good as you, but you go, oh man, their strengths really hit on our weaknesses. That's a concern. I just don't think that's the case. I think this is the most ideal setting. They don't love to push the tempo. Great. We could keep that low tempo, pound them inside where they don't have as much size. They're not going to kill you from three. That's not really their game. So they're a little bit less prone to big upsets. They've played, 5 games against quality opponents, or quad 1 or quad 2 games. Their only wins a home game against North Texas. I think, you're not going to play a young team in the NCAA tournament, but as far as it goes, this was, I think, the best draw a 5-seed Clemson could have gotten.
Yeah, no, I guess my last word on that is I think Lakin's huge in this game. He can't have a dud. I think that could shift things, and every now and then he just blows up and has a weird game. He's the guy that can really make it tough for McNeese to score with his ability to, move and defend the rim, and then also just eat up rebounds. So I think he's going to be, a key, staying out of foul trouble, to sort of dominating for Clemson. So I think that's the one sort of sore spot that McNeese could push on and maybe find some movement is if they could get Lakin in foul trouble.
I agree. I think that's they need a couple dominoes, and that's like the first domino you got to hit is he's in foul trouble or he's just playing poorly. Okay, now you need a couple things to go your way still, but now you've got a chance. So with that, we got to talk about Purdue. It would be wrong to have you here and not talk about Purdue. So they got High Point. I don't think we need to break that game down. I think Purdue will win. They'll be heavy favorites in a 4-13. Let's just assume Clemson and Purdue advance. Clemson's above Purdue in KenPom. Clemson is 18th. Purdue is 19th. They're really, really close in the net. Purdue is 19. Clemson's just a few spots behind them. It seems like more of a toss-up than, a 4-5 is always going to be a bit of a toss-up, but I kind of feel okay about this. Now, I know you got to toe the line here as the Purdue guy and the Clemson guy, but where's your head out on this one?
No toe on the line here. This is a nightmare matchup for Purdue. Just like if you were to say what team can really just gut a Purdue team is a team with two big guys on the inside that can rebound and score inside. Purdue cannot stop it. They are one of the worst interior defenses in the country, and I really would. I think Clemson would be my pick to beat Purdue, maybe handily in this game. It was just a brutal sort of end of the season for Purdue. They did beat USC in the Big Ten tournament in a game that probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, and then Michigan just obliterated them on the inside. So it's been a rough start. I mean, Purdue is two players. Can you stop the pick and roll up top? It's Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. Braden Smith is going to have the ball in his hand. Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to set a high screen. They're going to run a pick and roll, rinse and repeat, over and over again. Can Clemson stop that? Trey Kaufman-Renn is a great finisher inside. He's really good at drawing fouls. He bounces off teams. He's not very big as far as being like tall. He's like 6'8", but he's kind of a weird sort of wing, but he forward hybrid. So he moves really well. But he's gonna just slam you with his shoulder and he knocks people back all the time to get his points. And Trey Kaufman-Renn's gonna get his, but most teams have figured out that if you can stop Braden Smith, who was obviously a great player, Big Ten Player of the Year, but if you can stop him from scoring, Purdue can't score enough to win. And I think Clemson can stop Braden from scoring. He's not really good when you're physical with him. You trap him off screens, you push him backwards. He's not tall. He shoots a lot of like fadeaways because he can't get away. He can't get enough space just going straight up and down. Like against Michigan, almost all of his shots were short. But he's also a guy that can just go off and hit 7 threes. Like he's not, if he gets going, he's the guy that can beat you. He hasn't gotten going recently, and I think a lot of that is because teams have just said, okay, Trey Kaufman-Renn, can you score 40 points? Because we're not going to let Braden Smith score. And, Trey's been scoring like 30, but he can't carry the offense on his own. So I think this is an ideal draw for Clemson if they can get to Purdue. It's a struggling Purdue team down the stretch, and they do things. There's some things that they do well. Obviously, they can win this game. They have one of the most efficient offenses in the country, and that's almost exclusively because two people have the ball in their hands, and those are their two best players. That's why.
And those two are great. Trey Kaufman-Renn averaging 20.2 points per game. Braden Smith averaging 16.1. But a 6-foot guard, I love to put Jaden Zachary on him and see how much you could take him away. Purdue's lost. They're 3-6 in their last 9, coming in sort of limping in. Again, I still think High Point is not overly dangerous, but Either way, Clemson either comes in facing a cold Purdue team that's won 4 of 10 if they beat High Point, or they're facing a 13 seed. So I think either way, Clemson's, assuming they beat McNeese, which is a big assumption, is looking at a very realistic Sweet 16 path.
Yeah, no, I think I have Clemson going to the Sweet 16 out of this group. I don't think either game. I think almost the McNeese game would concern me a little bit more. Is Purdue has no rim protection. They have no answer for Sheff. Well, it'll be interesting because if Shefflin and Shakoff and Wren get going at it, those are some two big beefy boys that play very similar style of basketball, and there could be some elbows and some shoulders and some bodies flying. So that'll be one of the more interesting matchups, like one-on-one, if those two get to banging on each other a little bit. But Purdue was supposed to have a 7'4" center anchoring their defense this year. Daniel Jacobson, he was a 4-star recruit, played on the national team, and averaged like 3 blocks a game. And he broke his leg in the first game. The season practice, or during the first week of game week, and so they lost that, and then they had another guy. Oh my gosh! Now he's a 5-star. He was a 5-star recruit for BYU. Basically, he was at Purdue. He came in and said, "Matt Painter, I needed to be starting," and then Painter said no, and so he's at BYU. I think he's their Catchings, and he's their 6-man sniper off the bench draining threes, and that's what's missing from this Purdue team. If you watch this Purdue team, you're like, these pieces don't really fit together that well. That's because 2 big pieces that were supposed to be on this team just aren't there, and that's why they can't defend anybody.
And in fairness to Purdue, they just went to a national championship game and then lost their star player, who they leaned on quite heavily, in Zach Edey. So for them to come back and be a force seed again, as a program standpoint, it's pretty impressive. So,
and I don't want to be like a bag on Purdue. There's an amazing job by Matt Painter, the consistency to bring in these guys, and this I've never had this season as a Purdue fan. Somebody writes about Purdue. I wrote so many words about Purdue this year. I didn't have this year really circled as like the year to make a move for Purdue. This seemed like a building year where Smith and Kaufman are going to sort of take over the offense. They're both juniors this year. Fletcher Lawyer is a junior, and Painter sort of didn't bring any transfers, but instead he brought in a couple of freshmen, Jakari Harris out of Grayson, who is Glenn Robinson's son. Right, and they brought another kid in from prep school, CJ Cox. They both played well, but it kind of felt like if Matt Painter thought this was going to be like a Final Four run team, he would have brought in another guard, and he would have probably brought in another center. But instead, he brought in some really high potential freshmen. But I just feel like he didn't really have this schedule. I think they probably played above what I thought they would earlier in the year, and kind of looked like what I assumed they would look like towards the end.
One last note on Purdue, or at least one last note from me, is it seems like they haven't done a whole lot on the road. When I go through their quad 1 games, they've had 17 of them, which is an insanely difficult schedule. Very few of these quad 1 wins. You got Oregon, who, in my opinion, upset Liberty over Oregon maybe. And they went on the road to Iowa, and they got a win. They lost 2 neutral site games. They lost at Penn State. They lost at Marquette. Lost at Illinois, lost at Michigan State, lost at Michigan, lost at Indiana, and just lost to Michigan in the neutral site Big Ten tournament game. So maybe they're also, they're good, but they're not as good as they were last year. They're vulnerable to Clemson, and maybe they're not so good away from West Lafayette.
They're not, and that's it sort of goes back to what I was talking about. Their other guys just don't show up on the road. CJ Cox doesn't show up on the road. He might score 17 points in Mackey, and then go zero, put up zeros the next 3 road games. And the same thing, Miles Colvin, is another wing for Purdue off the bench. He doesn't show up on the road as well. And really, when they get on the road this year, it's just the offense is almost strictly Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn, with like Fletcher Lawyer, the other wing, who's one of the best three-point shooters in the country, who's, I would say, grossly underused at Purdue because everything just starts going Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, high pick and roll, rinse, repeat until the heat death of the universe.
Well, I think this sets up for a potential Sweet 16 run. We don't need to preview anything beyond that. I think that's too much guessing, but I will say I do have Clemson eventually losing to Houston, who I have going to the Final Four. I think just the way it sets up, it's an easier path to the Sweet 16 as a 5 versus a 6, but good thing is a 6 is you don't run into a 1 to get to the Elite 8. I think Houston's really, really good. Top 2, they're second defensively, and they're top 10 offensively. I think they're crazy good. But I think Sweet 16 would be right on the heels of an Elite 8, would be the most successful two-season run in Clemson history by a mile.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, God, Houston, Clemson, that's going to be a slugfest, man. You're going to wear a helmet in that game, because I watched Houston play Kansas State a couple of times, and they are brutally efficient.
There's some low tempo teams. Houston is the fifth slowest. Let's see, they are 360th in tempo, and Clemson is 327th. So, yeah, that could be a game played in 60s, 50s. I mean, that could be a really
first one to 60 wins in that one.
Could be. Well, but we're going to, regardless of whether that game happens or not, I think Clemson fans have a lot to look forward to on Thursday and then potentially Saturday. Drew, I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks for your inside knowledge on Purdue and the discussion on McNeese.
No problem. And, if the game does come around, have me back on, we can get a little more into what Purdue likes to do.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks for doing this.